joining us for the first time on the Sports Cage. I think it's his first time. I don't know, first time since I've been around. Dustin Forbes from Lethbridge, Alberta, voice of the Lethbridge Hurricane, Forbesy. I texted you last night and I said, he's probably a busy dude right now. Like, what time did you get to bed? What time did you lay your head down last night?
It was this morning, that's for sure. Yeah, it was a busy night last night and a busy day today. Made another deal this afternoon and getting ready for the game that you mentioned tonight. And it is indeed my first time on the Sports Cage. So I'm no Benny Walchuk, but I'll do my best.
We don't have anything to send you. We have... But once we get some swag, we'll shoot you across. You have Benny Walchuk coming up, SJHL report. Like we had John Keane on last week, and he stopped me in my tracks when I said like that BC US, like it's going to be a bloodbath out there. And he said, wait, the arms race is in the Central. And then now all this comes down yesterday with Medicine Hat getting Molendyk, you guys getting Caden Price. It is getting tough there. Is anyone else going to jump into this? Like, I know Calgary's made the move. They got Howe. Are we expecting anything from Edmonton now, or are they going to kind of do the Homer Simpson back up into the shrubbery?
If I was Kurt Hill in Edmonton, I'm not sure I would ante up anything. They own Seattle and Moose Jaw's picks in this year's draft, their first rounders, and those are both probably going to be lottery picks. So I wouldn't be touching those. And anybody that asks Edmonton in trade conversation is going to start there, I'm sure, in terms of asking for a return. And when you look at what Lethbridge has done, Medicine Hat has done, Calgary's done, you mentioned Calgary, and they've also added Sawyer Mineo, Daniel Hauser before the weekend. So they are all in. Carson Burney in another trade on Saturday. So they're all in. Lethbridge is all in. Medicine Hat is all in. And the crazy thing about it all is only two of those three teams could make it to the conference final. There's going to be one team that's going to be very disappointed with a second round exit, assuming they make it to the second round. So if I was Edmonton, I would just run the course right now and make the playoffs and take the experience for the young group there and pivot to next season. And then Red Deer's kind of seemingly open for business. They've made a couple of moves with Fabrizi and Burney, so we'll see what Brent Sutter does there.
Yeah, okay. So on the heels of that, do you see Kalen Lind going anywhere?
Well, I mean, I'm sure he's taking calls. I'm sure that the ask is probably pretty high. So, I mean, I think any general manager wouldn't be doing their due diligence if they weren't taking calls. I think the move of Fabrizi and Burney maybe opens the door there to have the conversation about players on that roster. But I also know, and I've said this on social media, it's not that I cheer for the Red Deer Rebels, I'll preface that, but it's tough to see a team not get to see their full potential because of injuries, and that's kind of been the situation for Red Deer this year. And Kalen Lind is such a good player. The Southwest Saskatchewan kid would be a great add anywhere, I'm sure, especially when you think about guys that you want to win with in the playoffs.
Forbesy Kellen here. Great to have you on. Long time no see, buddy.
It's been a while.
Yeah. As we look at trades elsewhere, were you somewhat surprised by the Tri-City move today, going out and getting Alec, or do you think this is more of a change of scenery thing for Alec and Jordan Gavin?
Yeah, I think that's a good hockey trade for both teams. And you look at the Western Hockey League now, and it's buy now, sell now, right? It's that buy and then sell mentality to be able to win. I think that's a really good hockey trade for two organizations that get really talented players. Charlie Alec hadn't had a great season in Brandon, so maybe a change of scenery for him into Tri-City, and they've got a really good defense, and Stu Barnes does such a good job as the head coach there. And Jordan Gavin's a really high-end offensive guy, was a former second overall pick in the Western Hockey League prospects draft. So I looked at that as an opportunity, I think, for both of those teams, not only to maybe address needs that they needed to address right now for them to have success this season, but looking ahead to next season for them to be able to take a step, and maybe two players that needed a change for sure.
Okay, let's go back to the Central. And for people that are listening that don't know, a lot about it, maybe they haven't gotten to a game to see any of these teams. like break down these teams, what you see in your hockey mind and your eyeballs that you get to watch them a lot. Let's start with your team, Lethbridge. Like, are they built back end up? Are they deep all the way through? Obviously, they make the trade. They got goaltending now. What's going to make Lethbridge tick to win and move over and play the West?
Well, I think and I'm biased, of course, because I broadcast for the team and I work for the team. But when I look at the roster, I just think it's well balanced. You obviously add a really good goaltender who won a championship last year, and Jackson Unger as the kind of forgotten guy in the quote unquote Braden Yager trade. It was also Jackson Unger that was part of that deal too, and everybody seems to forget. And Jackson's been really good since coming over in that trade. So you show me a championship goaltender, I'll show you a team that has a chance to win. The Hurricanes have been one of the better defensive teams this season with their D-core as is, and you add Caden Price. At a cost, you give up a first-round pick and a former first-round pick and a really high-end young defenseman in Will Sharp, but you bring in a guy I would argue is as good offensively as Sharp and maybe a bit further along in his ability to defend at a high level, so you get a bit better defensively. And then you look at the forward group, and you always talk about championship teams and the depth down the middle, and that's what the Hurricanes have right now. You can run Braden Edwards, who's had a terrific overage season, Braden Yager, who we all know who he is, and Jordan Gustafson in a prior deal right after Christmas. Hasn't played a game yet, waiting to come back from injury, but a signed guy that probably would have played pro this season in Vegas if not for an injury. So you get to run those three guys down the middle at your center ice slot, and then Cash Andreessen in your four hole, who's a draft eligible guy on the NHL Central Scouting radar. I like that makeup. And then you've got good wingers around that can complement Leo Breyer, Logan Wormold, who's had a really good season, Miguel Marcus once he gets healthy. So I like the balance that the Hurricanes have. But I mean, you look at the other teams around the Central, and we'll go through it. But it's okay. So yeah,
here's the question: who do you think is a better matchup between Medicine Hat and Calgary for the Hurricanes, if it comes to that at the end for the East?
Well, I mean, that's pick 'em. It's a pick 'em, right? I mean, teams that are going to come out from Saskatchewan and the Wheat Kings are going to come out here, and they're going to do a 3-game swing where they go Calgary, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, and it's kind of murderer's row now with all the moves that have been done. To pick one of those two teams as your better team, I think the Hurricanes have had more success this season against Medicine Hat. But the home teams won every game of the 5 so far. Lethbridge is 3-2. The Hurricanes struggled against Calgary. They lost the first 3 games in regulation, but earned a victory coming out of the Christmas break. But that's the one thing, and you guys know this too, is the teams that were constructed in October and November are no longer even remotely close to the teams that are constructed now. So we'll see what happens when they get to lock heads. The Hurricanes still have, it would be 3 games against Medicine Hat and 4 against Calgary. So There's going to be some significant barn burners in the second half, that's for sure.
Forbes, you talked about Murderers Row coming through there. A little bit of return PTSD from 2018 coming through the East Division with Moose Jaw, Swift Current, and Regina that you guys are finally getting to give back out there, I would imagine.
Yes, very similar, in fact. And that's a great point. I was talking with James Gallo, of course, good friend, I'm sure, the show, and voice of the Warriors, who we play tonight. And we kind of referenced that 2018 season when Regina loaded up because they were hosting the Memorial Cup, and Swift Current loaded up because they felt that they were a good enough team to win, and Moose Jaw loaded up because they felt they were a good enough team to win. And of that, 2 of those teams didn't make it to the conference final, so there was some disappointment. Of course, Regina hosted, as you well know, and was out in the first round, but that year very similar to this year in the Central, and 3 teams that fancy themselves as championship caliber teams that are clearly all in.
Yeah, and are you, so when you talk about the Memorial Cup, obviously you guys made the deal yesterday getting Price from Kelowna. You got to expect that they're still sort of going to tinker here a little bit before the deadline as they prepare to be the hosts a year from now. Is there other guys on their lineup that you think could be seen into this arms race that we're seeing in the Central? I have to assume that Bruce probably is trying to get guys east as opposed to staying within his conference.
Well, selfishly, I hope they all get traded in the Western Conference, just because I'm not sure if there's any more places I'd want to see them go in the Central specifically. But you look at their lineup, and there's a couple of pieces that they still have to be able to move. Most notably, I think the first name that comes to mind is Andrew Crystal. He's had such a terrific season, and everybody talks about how good Gavin McKenna has been this season for Medicine Hat, and for good reason. He's an exceptional player, but Andrew Crystal has a better point per game rate this season than Gavin McKenna, which is wild to think. So there's going to be I'm sure there's a long list of teams that are lined up at the door to have conversations with Bruce. And Bruce has done it before, and he's been such a good general manager and owner in the Western League that he has a pulse as to what he needs to do to be able to position his team to be able to get young talent. And I think the Caden Price deal is a great example of, I think a lot of people were looking at Caden Price and Andrew Crystal as being potentially on the market and what those two pieces would bring in. And in Caden Price's case, a lot of people circled 2 first-round picks. Well, you get a player in that deal from Lethbridge and Will Sharp, who next year is going to be an 18-year-old who will get drafted this year and a first-round pick. So I think it's a savvy move from Bruce's standpoint to be able to get both needs of a player that can help you now, a player that'll be a big part of your team next year, and the draft ammunition. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the type of deal that you see Kelowna pull if, and I imagine when, an Andrew Crystal deal gets done too. And furthermore, Stancil, I mean, he's a player that I wouldn't be surprised if they look to potentially move as a guy that, was at the World Juniors and would be a 2-spotter next year as an overage. So he would have some value, but there's only going to be a limited amount of teams that might be in the running for a guy like that.
Well, now that I got your number, Forbesy, you will be utilized like a first liner here on the Sports Cage. And you know what? I was talking to a guy today, and we were joking back and forth, and I said, you watch that East Conference final. Last year we got to watch with Moose Jaw, and then Portland came here. It is such good hockey. It is so exciting. It's springtime. It's nice out. I can't think of a better 4-hour jaunt with the golf courses open to go watch Lethbridge and Medicine Hat play in the Eastern Conference final. So you never know. Keep your head on a swivel.
Hey,
yeah.
I'm available. Call me, as they once said in the newsroom. I don't know if you guys watched that show, but I'm available. Call me. The idea of a Medicine Hat Lethbridge Conference final would be incredible. I think it would be so. And here's a fun fact for you guys: the Highway 3 rivalry, as it's dubbed, right, Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, in the 37 seasons. This is the 38th season the Hurricanes have been in the Western League since relocating from Calgary. Lethbridge and Medicine Hat have only played in the playoffs twice in that time. Both went 7 games. Lethbridge was victorious in both. So,
yeah, there we go. Little tidbit for us there. Thanks so much, Forbesy. Have a good call tonight. Moose Jaw in town. Looking forward to seeing how things shake out. And of course, like I said, we'll have you back on.
Thanks, gentlemen. Say hi to my friend Benny for me.
We will. That is voice of the Lethbridge Hurricanes. Who just made another massive deal yesterday, getting Caden Price, Dustin Forbes from Lethbridge, Saskatchewan. Let's take a quick break. Lethbridge, Alberta. Medicine Hat Lethbridge final. That excites me more than a Calgary anybody final. I want to see those two teams. And what he said, it hasn't happened that often. The Highway 3, couldn't remember what the highway was.
Yeah, it's funny because, nobody really loves the NHL markets in our league. The Calgary and Edmontons, they get enough of it. But yeah, I think you have Pete Anholt and Willie Desjardins, two of the classics of the Western League going at it. So yeah, I'm pulling I'm pulling for those guys.
Mustache versus no mustache. You never know who's going to win. It is the all-new Sports Cage. We're streaming at sportscage.com.